The final section of the core coaching competency model is section D, cultivating learning and growth. And the one competency that is in this section is about facilitating client growth. ICF defines that as the coach partners with the client to transform the learning and insight that they got in the session into action. It promotes client autonomy in the coaching process. So let's look at 1 and 2. Marker number 1 says that the coach works with the client to integrate this new awareness, insider learning into their worldview and into their behaviors. So one way that we do that is to actually ask the client what they learned. Ask them, what are you learning in this session? What are you realizing? What's new for you that you didn't know before? What changed from the time we start until now? And then reflecting on, what are you going to do with that new learning? What are you going to do with this knowledge that you gained? How are you going to use this as you move forward? And so some of that might be action items, and some of it is really these new ways of thinking that they've uncovered, and these new beliefs that they've uncovered, and maybe broken down some old thinking. And now they've got new freedom, a new lease on life, a new way of being, new ideas about what can be. And so by helping them to bring that to the surface and to recognize that they can do something with that, and that getting them to talk about what they will do and how they will integrate that into their life going forward is the way to solidify it. The way to solidify it is not for the coach to tell the client what they learned. And it's not for the coach to tell the client how to integrate it. They won't have any lasting change if you do the work for them. Let the client do the work. And number 2 says that the coach partners with the client to design goals, actions and accountability, and measures that integrate and expand the new learning. So this is not talking about like, here's the goal of the session, right? We do need to have a goal of the session, and we do need to know what we're going to be talking about. Now we're probably further into that conversation, maybe throughout, and most likely towards the end, right? So we've talked about a lot of things. They've learned a lot of things, and they've talked about how they're going to integrate these new ways of thinking. And now we want to talk a bit about, what are you going to do? What are some takeaways, right? You've got all this learning. You've done all this work. What now? What are you going to do between the time you leave today and the time we meet again? And so working with them to design some goals. What is it that I want to accomplish between now and next week, or 2 weeks from now? And how am I going to accomplish that? And how will I know that those actions get me where I want to be? So that's part of the conversation that you can have. And then along with those actions and goals come accountability. How are you going to hold yourself accountable? How are you going to make sure that you do this for you? How are you going to make sure this happens? Those types of questions. When looking at accountability in coaching, it's really important to let the client figure out how they want to be accountable to themselves. This is not about the coach holding the client accountable. That actually doesn't create sustainable change. It creates compliance. It also puts the coach on the hook for making sure the client succeeds. And as we talked about in the beginning, competencies around making sure that the client understands their responsibility. Their responsibility is to implement change. It's not the coaches. So we want to let them own the accountability for the actions that they take or don't take. And if they don't take them, let's talk about what happened and why that didn't happen. And maybe it's that we designed the wrong goals. Maybe you designed the wrong actions. Maybe after they left, they realized that they were not really all that important and we were talking about the wrong thing anyway. There's learning to be had. It's not about the coach holding the client accountable. It's about the client being accountable for themselves and seeing what they can learn when they sometimes don't do those actions. Marker number 3 here says that the coach acknowledges and supports client autonomy and the design of goals, actions, and methods of accountability. And this is what I was just talking about. Letting the client be autonomous. We're partners. We're pairing on this to figure out what's best for your success. But you own the decision. You actually need to decide what's right for you and what actions will be best for you and what accountability will be best for you. As a coach, you shouldn't be assigning your client homework. They should be figuring out their own homework. Now, there will be times when you'll have a sense or an intuition that doing something might be helpful. And so that happens. And my advice for that is let the client figure out what they want to do. Let them design their action items and their accountability and all those things. And if you still feel like, there's this thing I'm thinking, then that's okay. Share that with them as a challenge or a suggestion that they can decide to do or not do, right? I really am getting the sense that if you did this thing or you read this article, it might give you some insight. I want to give that to you. And then that way, if you'd like to do that, wonderful. Let's talk about if it was helpful. And if not, that's okay too. You might challenge your client and say, I really would love to see you go out and just try 7 new things this week. Experiment with 7 new things and see what you can fail at and see what you can learn at and see if what it's like when you conquer your fear. The client may be like, oh, I don't think so. That's a lot. That's okay. When you challenge your client, they need to also understand, so there's some education there, that they can do that thing, that challenge, or they can counteroffer and say, well, I won't do 7 things, but I'll do 2. How's that? I'll do 2 experiments. They can also just say, no, I don't think that'll be helpful. And so it's important when you're designing your relationship that y'all talk about that. Or at the very least, when you offer that to them, you explain to them, you can do this, you can say no, or you can say, I won't do that, but I will do this other thing. The power is all yours.